Okay, guys, today's message, we're gonna look at the message of Jesus and Zacchaeus. It's in Luke chapter 19, verse 1 through 10. So we're gonna read the scripture together. I'm gonna have it on screen. Here we go. I'll read it for us. He entered Jericho and was passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled, "He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." This is the word of God. Okay, so I'm pretty sure we have at least heard this message once. It's a fairly simple message. If you were to kind of make bullet points out of this story, it goes something like this. So Jesus, being the celebrity he was at the time, he was about to pass through this place called Jericho. And because he was a celebrity, a lot of people wanted to see him. And Zacchaeus, the main character of this story, was one of them. He also wanted to see Jesus. He climbed up on a tree, sycamore tree. If you don't know how big that could be, if you Google it, you're gonna find an interesting picture. It looks like they actually have located the sycamore tree that Zacchaeus had climbed up on, but I very much doubt that that's the actual tree. But you kind of get the idea how big that tree is if you look at the picture. But anyways, he climbed up on a tree. Why? To get a better vision of Jesus. And Jesus saw it. He went there. And he calls Zacchaeus. And he calls him down. And then he says, "I must stay at your house today." And then Jesus declares salvation. So, what is this story trying to tell us? Well, there is salvation, and salvation came to only Zacchaeus in this story. That's very important. And we're going to try to understand how that happened. What led Zacchaeus to salvation? We all know that salvation is given by grace through faith. But what was it about Zacchaeus that Jesus specifically announced the salvation for Zacchaeus? What did Zacchaeus do? So that's sort of what we're going to try to look into. So I think there are about 4 things that Zacchaeus did that I could find through this passage. We're going to look at them together. Let's look at verse 1. So it goes, "He entered Jericho and was passing through." He refers to Jesus. Verse 2, "And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich." Now, we might look at this and say, okay, what does that tell us? But it's actually very, very important. So, in that town, Jericho, there was this guy, Zacchaeus, who was not only a tax collector, but also a very rich person. Why was that in the beginning of the story? What does that matter? Why does it matter that Zacchaeus was a rich person? And what does it matter that he was a tax collector? It might help us to understand this better if we understand the background a little bit. So at the time, Jewish people were under the Roman Empire's control. And for one to be a tax collector, that was actually really, really, really bad. Because if you think about it, you live under the Roman Empire. And if you're a tax collector, what you're doing is you're working for the Roman government, and you have to collect the tax more than what the Roman government requires so that you can also make money. So in other words, if you were a tax collector, then you were ripping off people. And they are not just any people. They are actually your friends. They're your family. They're your people. A Jewish person making money off of fellow Jewish people. So you kind of get the idea. We live in a very independent culture. We live in a culture where everyone thinks money is the best thing. But during this time, the society wasn't like that. It was a shame culture, shame and honor culture. So what that means is there's something more important than just money. In a shame and honor culture, especially where I come from, in Korea, we very much honor our family name, our achievements, our status in the society. All those things matter. But during this time, for people living in the Middle Eastern area, it was so much more important. Their culture was specifically revolving around the society. So if you are alienated from the society, then you have no standing. It's almost as if you are an outcast. At that point, would it matter if you have money, if you're an outcast? I don't think so. You have no friends. You walk on the street, people look at you and they point at you. They don't want to be anywhere near you because they would think you're a sinner. In other words, you're an outcast. If you were a tax collector during that time, you were an outcast. But think for a second, why did people still choose to be a tax collector? And if you're a tax collector, I'm sure you could have still made money in a legitimate way, but even then people would have still hated you. But why is it that people chose that profession over something else? Why couldn't they get a job where, you would still retain your friends, you would still have your family, you would still have your society backing you up? Why couldn't you do that? Well, it looks like for Zacchaeus, nothing was more important than money. In today's society, especially the culture that we live in, people think that it almost doesn't matter whatever you do as long as you make a lot of money. So I've seen people say things like this, where this person makes a lot of money, but he does so in a very shady way. And I remember one person saying to me, well, it doesn't matter, at the end of the day, he's a millionaire. So it's as if the ends justify the means, right? That's a utilitarian thought, but that's totally against what the Bible is teaching. And even though in this culture people might think that way, during this time in their culture, they at least didn't think that way. So if you were a tax collector, then everyone pointed their fingers at you. That's why it was at the beginning of the story. It kind of sets the scene so that we better understand who Zacchaeus was. And we also understand how people would have looked at Zacchaeus. And it also explains how Jesus was looking for sinners. So in the first two verses, it pretty much explains everything. one thing that I want to add here is about Zacchaeus' name. I've mentioned this multiple times before, but during this time, I mean, there was something about the name. Your name wasn't just a name. Your name had a meaning, and not only did it have meaning, it pretty much identified you. That was your identity. Your name pretty much represented who you are. So guess what Zacchaeus' name was? In Hebrew, it's called Zacchaeus, and it means here pure or innocent. Pure or innocent. That's what the name Zacchaeus meant. But isn't that totally opposite of who Zacchaeus was? Right? He was a tax collector who was ripping off of his fellow community. And yet, his name meant pure or innocent. That was the identity that he was to be. But his actual life was the total opposite of that. So there is that first irony. There's actually a second irony. I don't know if we read it here. Let's see. Verse 3. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd he could not, because he was small in stature. He was small in stature. What does it matter here? Well, it tells you another thing, another irony. The other irony was his size. What do you think he went for money? What do you think he became a tax collector? He wanted to be big. He wanted to be bigger than others. But like I said, there's an irony here. It says his stature was small. So he couldn't even see beyond the people. Right? There were a lot of people. And because he's so short, he couldn't see anything. Isn't that an irony? You do all these things to make a lot of money, to feel as if you are greater, you are bigger than the rest of the people. And yet, you can't even see beyond them because you're so small. With this irony in mind, I want us to look at something. So, this crowd was bigger than Zacchaeus, and this crowd was the target of Zacchaeus's what should I say? How should I say this? The crowd of whom Zacchaeus was taking advantage. Let me just put it this way. The crowd was bigger than Zacchaeus, even though Zacchaeus was taking advantage of them. Regardless, let's look at this. So, verse 3, again, he was seeking to see who Jesus was. He was seeking to see who Jesus was. It might not look like a big deal, but think about this for a moment. Zacchaeus didn't really need anything, did he? He had all the money in the world. He didn't really need anything. And if he was just curious about who this Jesus was, he could have sent somebody. If you have a lot of money, you can actually use that money to get people to do something, right? He could have sent people, but he went there himself. He wasn't just seeking Jesus. He was actually desperate to see Jesus. Why was he desperate? Why was he desperate? If I have to guess, I think he finally realized that money wasn't everything to him. He thought that was the only thing that he needed. So he went after it. He was very competitive. He beat everyone. And he survived. He got that position. He finally has the money. And he thought he would have everything. He thought he would feel happy. He thought he would be satisfied. But none of that happened. He knew that he was missing something. And that's why he was seeking Jesus. So he was on a search for this very thing that would make him feel whole again. Part of him must have been totally broken, right? He's an outcast. Nobody wants to befriend him. He has money, but you can't really make a friend with your money. They're not real friends. So he had this hole in his heart, and he was desperately trying to fill that hole. He didn't quite understand what he needed, but he thought that seeking Jesus was the first step, and he was right. So here we read verse 4. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. So, one, he was seeking Jesus, right? And it wasn't just out of curiosity. Here's my pointer number 2. He was determined. As I said, he could have sent somebody, but he didn't. He was very serious, and he wanted to really, really meet Jesus himself. He wasn't just casually searching for his hobby to have fun. As I was preparing for this message, I kind of I try to put myself into the crowd and try to understand what waiting for Jesus would be like, what seeing Jesus would be like. Or if I was just living in the town and I hear this news of this big celebrity coming. Well, I'm not really into any celebrities, so I can't really relate to that. But if I hear the news of Jesus coming, I don't think I would have went there myself. I would have brought my friends. Hey, Eric, Jesus is coming. Do you want to go see him? Hey, Merlin, are you free Tuesday evening? Jesus is coming to this town. Do you want to go see him? I would be so excited. I would bring my friends over. But then at the same time, I wonder if there was anybody that just wanted to check him out. Just check him out. They don't really want to get to know him. But hey, apparently there's some famous dude coming to our town. Do you just want to go there and maybe get an autograph? And if not an autograph, maybe take a picture? Casual fans. Then they're not really into it. They don't really know Jesus. They don't really want to know Jesus. But they just want to kind of check him out. I'm pretty sure there were some people like that too. And some people maybe were brought there because of their friends, maybe their family members. They were brought there. They weren't really interested in knowing Jesus or what he was about to do. So there are this casual people. And then there is Zacchaeus, who was desperate to see Jesus. That's the key. Being desperate to see Jesus. We already know the end of the story. Zacchaeus was the only one claimed to be have been saved. You need to be desperate for Jesus. But there is another thing that I want us to look at. So, verse 4 he climbed up into a sycamore tree. Now, okay, so we kind of read that as, yeah, he was so small he couldn't see beyond people, so he had to get up on something. We could easily think that way. But do you think that's an easy thing to do? I'm not talking in terms of just climbing up something. I mean, even that in itself would be hard, right? At least for me, I don't know how to climb up on things. But when you just imagine, let's say there's about, I don't know, 500 people, and Jesus is just walking by, and what Zacchaeus was doing was he was looking at where Jesus was going, and then he moved over there to see Jesus. He went up, climbed up on a sycamore tree. So if Jesus was heading this way, Zacchaeus wasn't here. Zacchaeus went here before Jesus got there. He was preparing himself to see Jesus. This is very important. And not only did he do that, not only did he move to a place where Jesus would pass by, he actually went there, and then he climbed up the tree. Now that's a spectacle. Think about that for a moment. There's about 500 people there, and they already know who you are, right? They all hate you. They would all point their fingers at you. And yet, you are moving towards the direction where Jesus is heading. So people would have seen Zacchaeus, and they would be like, oh, that sinner. What is that guy doing there? Let him pass. Jesus is going there. It's not your place. You don't deserve to be there. Not only did he move there, he actually moved up on the tree. So that's a spectacle by itself, right? People can actually see you climb up. It's almost a performance. Like, what is that small guy doing? What are you climbing up the tree for? But Zacchaeus didn't care. He didn't care. Why? Because he wanted to see Jesus. That was the most important thing. He didn't care about how people would have looked at him. He didn't care that people would point their fingers at him. Nothing could deter him from seeing Jesus because he was desperate. That's how badly he wanted to see Jesus. I don't know if you ever have been alienated, but if you are an outcast, you don't want to go to a place where people would see you, right? Now Zacchaeus, being an outcast, he volunteered to go there. He could have sent people. He didn't. He went there himself, knowing that he could be blamed for everything that he would be doing. But he was determined. Let's keep on reading. Verse 5. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. Okay, 1 second, guys. There's something wrong with the camera. Okay. All right, let me read it again. Verse 5. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. Here's my pointer number 3. What did Zacchaeus do? Well, first, we know that he was seeking Jesus, right? And number 2, we know that he wasn't just casually seeking Jesus, he was determined. And here comes number 3. He heard Jesus. He heard Jesus. Jesus talked to him. When Jesus came to the place where Zacchaeus climbed up the sycamore tree, and Jesus basically said, Zacchaeus, come down. Is that what he said? No. He said, hurry and come down. Hurry and come down. It wasn't, hey, Zacchaeus, yeah, come down when you can. Come down when you get a chance. No, he didn't say that. He said, hurry and come down. That means right now. Come down right now. So we can't stay at your house. I must come to your house. Here is another irony in this picture. And this is actually something that I learned from a book as I became a manager. One of the things that the book talks about is how you're supposed to behave, how you're supposed to, I guess, act at your workplace if you're a manager and you are addressing your staff. One thing that the book tells you to do, of many things, what I remember, is that you are supposed to be either looking down, or you should be at the same eye level as your staff as you're addressing that person. You're not supposed to look up like this. Do you know why? Because when you're looking up, you are acknowledging that this person is superior than you. I guess that's just the unspoken language. That's something that I learned from the book. And I'm pretty sure this doesn't apply to every single case, but I think it applies to this picture here. Zacchaeus climbed up on a tree. Now, if you climbed up on a tree, what do you have to do? You have to hold on to that tree, right? You're holding onto the tree. You're trying to see Jesus come by, and when Jesus finally got there, he looks up. He looks up and he says, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. Stop holding onto the tree. Hurry and come down. The irony in this picture is that Jesus, the creator of the entire universe, he is looking up, and Zacchaeus is looking down at Jesus. God is looking up at a sinner, and he's waiting for a response. Do you see what's wrong with this picture? But isn't this our picture? Think of the sycamore tree as something that you have piled up in this world, trying to succeed, trying to survive, trying to just gather whatever you can. Whatever the sycamore tree may be. Maybe it's fame, maybe it's money, maybe it's, a bunch of friendships, maybe it's, your family's welfare, whatever that may be. We pile up our priorities like a sycamore tree. We get on top of it, and we don't want to come down. We hold on to it. Jesus, you're passing by. Okay, so I'm just gonna pile up my priorities here, and I'm just gonna get on top of it, and I'm gonna hold on to it. Hold on to those priorities. These are important. Jesus, you are important. You are passing by. All good. I want to see you. Yeah. I love you, but I want to hold on to this. I want to hold on to this tree. This is so important to me. These are my priorities. I need to hold on to these. Maybe we got up on that tree because without that tree, we would look small. Zacchaeus probably got up on that tree because he was so small, he couldn't see beyond the people. He still wanted to become bigger. There is that symbolic language that we first didn't recognize. Without this tree, we would look small, weak, or helpless. But we don't want to be seen this way. That's not what the world teaches. This world teaches that you have to be strong. You have to be independent. You have to have autonomy. You have to have all these things. You need to have money. You need to have relationships. You need to prioritize certain things that the culture tells you because that is considered a norm. And the world teaches you to hold on to those priorities. I can only picture Zacchaeus holding onto the tree very, very strongly. He was maybe even shaking because he was holding it too tight. But what does Jesus say to this? Hurry and come down. Jesus doesn't just say, Zacchaeus, come down when you get a chance. No, right now. Hurry and come down. If we get off that tree, it could be very possible that we become despisable in our own eyes. I personally went through this experience, and I didn't even know that I climbed up on a tree. But looking back, I know I did. And I held onto the tree as long as I could. Even when Jesus told me to hurry and come down, I held onto that thing. I didn't want to come down because I couldn't admit that I was a sinner. I had no problem saying it with my mouth, but in my heart, I could never accept it. So it was almost as if I got down from that tree, then I would really be a sinner. That would be an acknowledgement that I'm a sinner. And I didn't want to do that. Again, unknowingly, because I have no problem showing other people that I'm not a sinner. But unknowingly, I didn't want to admit it. Unknowingly, I was holding onto that tree. And I guess part of that could be that I didn't want to look small before other people. There were a lot of people looking up to me. There were a lot of people looking at me as a leader. And I guess unknowingly, I had that sort of arrogance. And maybe I was even being dishonest with myself. Unknowingly. But it all comes down to this. I didn't want to get down from the tree because I would look smaller. As if tree is a part of me. All the priorities that I piled up. But Jesus knows us so well that he not only comes to the tree, not only does he look up to the sinner, but he says, hurry and come down. And there's something important here. Verse 5. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus. He calls you by name. He calls you by name. Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. Zacchaeus, whose name means pure and innocent. Zacchaeus, you are pure and innocent in my eyes. Let that tree go. Hurry and come down. It doesn't matter what people say about you. I know who you are. I know you by name. Hurry and come down. What does Zacchaeus do here? Verse 6. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. What does that tell us? Jesus asked him for his response. Zacchaeus responded. How? Joyfully. There's another important thing here. So Jesus asked him to hurry and come down, right? Hurry and come down. Verse 6, so he hurried and came down. He didn't just come down. I was trying to think about this in my head. If you're up on a tree, you have to be very, very, very careful as you go down. If you go up on a height, it's very dangerous for you to come down. Going up is very tiring, but coming down, that's when you get injured. But Zacchaeus didn't do it slowly. He hurried and came down. He didn't care if he would get hurt. He hurried and he came down. Why? Because Jesus asked him to hurry and come down. Hurry and come down. So Zacchaeus hurried and came down. He responded, and he didn't only respond, he actually did it joyfully. He didn't come down out of obligation. Yeah, now I'm considered a Christian, so I guess I have to I have to force myself down there. I really don't want to get down from this tree, but I'm gonna force myself. Yes, this is Christian discipline. He didn't do it out of obligation. He did it joyfully. He did it joyfully. He didn't worry about getting hurt, lowering himself from the heights. For him to get down from the tree, he had to know that he would be smaller. He would be laughed at even more, right? You gotta imagine all that crowd. All those people are looking at you right now, up on the tree, and their eyes are at Jesus and you, conversing with one another. Everyone is looking at you. But he hurried and came down. He knew his shame. He knew the embarrassment. But he came down. He didn't care about all the eyes. Then what does he do? He received him joyfully. That's the end of verse 6. He received him joyfully. Now, let's look at the other people. Verse 7. And when they saw it, they meaning the crowd, they all grumbled. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. The other people judged Jesus, and they basically pretty much draw a line between them and Zacchaeus, because they pretty much defined Zacchaeus as a sinner, right? Verse 8. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. Now, Zacchaeus, he couldn't stop himself but publicly repent of his sins. To Zacchaeus, it didn't matter what people would say to him. It didn't matter how people would look at him. Now, people are already pointing fingers at Zacchaeus as well as at Jesus. But what does Zacchaeus do? In the midst of the people, he stands up and he goes, Jesus, I repent. I repent. What was his repentance? Verse 8, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. This is the heart of someone who repented. Not only did you turn from sin, now you are making up for it because your heart has changed. There's an irony here. So all those people who gathered to see Jesus, they're pointing fingers at Jesus as well as Zacchaeus. They're saying, how can he engage with a sinner? That's not right. They draw a line. Instead of trying to join Jesus and Zacchaeus together, what did they do? They stood where they were and they blamed them. They judged them. There's a surprise here. So, what Zacchaeus said here is, the half of my goods I give to the poor. The half of my goods I give to the poor. This was so much more than what's required by the law. According to the law, and this is in Numbers chapter 5. What's required by the law is, if you sinned against somebody, then you give that person the principal plus a fifth. So you're supposed to give back 120% to the person. But what's the case saying here? I restore it fourfold. I will give 400%. He's being overly generous, right? And that's a sign of a repentant heart. There's another thing here. The half of my goods I give to the poor. The half of my goods. Do you know why it's important? Because the half of my goods, the half of what Zacchaeus has, includes the stuff that he had gained apart from this unrighteous gain, illegal gain. It includes everything that he has in his possession right now. The half of my goods, even if it's something that I legitimately acquired myself, doesn't matter. The half of my goods I give to the poor. That's another sign of a repentant heart. Nobody told him to do it this way, but he was so compelled to do it, to publicly announce it. That was his heart. He couldn't help but say it in front of public, not to show it off. Everyone is still calling him a sinner. Nothing changed, but his heart changed. Verse 9. And Jesus said to him, today, this is after Zacchaeus repented, and Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. Abraham is the father of faith, right? Zacchaeus also, even if people call him a sinner, he now repented. He now became a family of faith. Therefore, he also is a son of Abraham. Verse 10, Jesus extends the invitation of salvation. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. There are people, the crowd, and Zacchaeus, and Jesus. Everything is the same, but only Zacchaeus responded the right way. The people, they drew a line. They said, Zacchaeus is a sinner. I don't want to engage. Jesus, you are engaging a sinner. I hope you know that, because we're not about to. We don't want to engage a sinner. So Jesus, I don't particularly care what it is that you're doing, but I can't be with you because you are trying to be with a sinner. Because I don't want to be a sinner. That's what people did. But Zacchaeus, who was desperate, who had to see Jesus, he had to come before Jesus, and nothing could stop him. Sometimes I wonder, why is it that only Zacchaeus went up on a tree? And I know going up on a tree is not really an easy thing, and it's also not a thing that you would want to do in front of a lot of people unless you want to make a scene. But when I went to Disney World and we were watching this I don't know what the show is called, but there was a lot of lightings. You were watching the show, and everyone would position themselves so that they could actually watch the show, and they would choose to go up somewhere, maybe go inside the building, go to the top floor, trying to watch that show from the beginning, so that they would get a whole view. And people do that because they would want to do that. They want to watch the show, right? But here, in this passage, we see that only Zacchaeus did it. No one else did it. No one else was desperate enough to see Jesus this way. No one else was desperate enough to see where Jesus was going and place himself there first. And Jesus says, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." He is still speaking to everyone here, including the people that are judging him. Jesus is sending the invitation of salvation to everyone. It's just a matter of us responding. So I want us to hurry and come down from the tree, from the priorities that we piled up. Come down from that tree. Jesus is right at the bottom of the tree. Jesus is looking up. Jesus is calling us by our names. And Jesus says, "Hurry and come down. I know who you are. I know you by name. Hurry and come down." Search with all your heart so I can come into your house today. Salvation is coming to your house today. Out of the crowd, out of all those people, only Zacchaeus was able to have a personal relationship with him. He was the only one that had conversation with Jesus. His invitation stands the same for all of us. Now it's up to us to either get down from the tree, to welcome Jesus into our house, or we could hold on to that tree and Jesus will keep on waiting there. Jesus is going to ask us to come down once, twice, over and over again. But how much longer do you want him to wait there? What's your response going to be?